Hey, Mr. Madison, how's it going?
Okay, good. What's up?
Ain't nothing too much. Just glad I was able to catch up with you. We spoke a few times over the phone already and things like that. So just
Yeah,
wanted to jump into it, talk about a few dogs and just for those who don't know you, they got to get to know you and just all the experience you have, all the knowledge you have. I think it'll be a good opportunity to continue to capture that and just share it with us while we still got you.
yeah. Well, appreciate the opportunity, and I'm just one guy out here trying to, well, I'm 73 and my health is not starting out. God, I was a beast. I was a
Right.
Navy SEAL during the Vietnam era, and at 58 years old, I did a contract with, the Department of Defense running combat operations in Afghanistan. I was 58 years old. Uh, and from time I was I think I was 16 years old when I first heard what the Navy SEALs were.
Right.
And the moment I heard about what they were and that they were doing stuff in in Vietnam, and they were sneaking around through the swamps of the Delta in South Vietnam. It was like, what?
Right.
And
Interesting.
man, I was like, done. There wasn't. I only stayed in school because I had to get a high school diploma to be able to get in there. Otherwise, I would have quit school right that minute. I wouldn't care what my old man or my mom or anybody said. I would have left right then if they would have let me.
If they would
But
have let you, you would have did it.
I would have gone right that minute. I wouldn't, and I never changed my mind from even down till today. But it. You know,
Right.
I got through it. I got in the SEALs and did my time there, and it was it developed me into what I'm into now. That's the dogs.
You're
Yeah,
the man behind the Sorrells or Sorrells line of dogs. And
yeah.
a lot of people just don't understand that. I don't think, for those who don't know, you really get the recognition you deserve just on that in itself. A lot of dogs may have Sorrells' name in front of it, but you had your hand on a lot of those dogs and been a part of those, dogs, you know, career, the history of them, and things like that. So
Yeah.
with all that being said, like you say, you're in your 70s and you still have dogs from then to now, and just in that, when you said the dogs have been a good part of keeping you going, I guess giving you like a purpose, a mission, things like that. How have that been for you?
Well, like I was saying there, with regard to the philosophy of going into the Navy SEALs and going into combat, and really as a young guy, at that time I was a kid. When I joined the Navy, I was actually 17 and a half years old.
Hmm.
So I got in there. I turned 18 when I got in there,
Hmm.
but I actually joined, I was 17 and a half. But that whole mentality, that you learn in the SEALs carried over into the dogs. And I met Bert Sorrells.
Right.
And just like the way I experienced wanting to become a Navy SEAL, the same mentality, the same drive drove me to the dogs. Because in
Right.
those days, this is late 70s, mid 70s. I got my first pit bull, not from Sorrells, but from another guy. I had a couple
Hmm.
of pit bulls, but I wanted to get deeper into it. And I met Bert, and now he was in it real deep. Of course, he was older
Right.
than I was. He'd been doing dogs for a long time already. I met him, and we clicked. I mean, he and I, we just got along good.
Right.
And I did some favors. I think I've talked about some of those favors in another
Right. Another interviews, I
interview.
think, with
Yeah, it was about the Johnny Walker Red Dog. I won't go through it again. It's out there. But
right.
anyway, I had done some favors for Bert and got connected to Bert, and so it was about not combat for myself, but dog combat, and and back in those days, it wasn't as late in the mid 70s. Hell, nobody even knew what a pit bull was really. I mean,
Right,
pit bull
exactly.
was not a household name. People didn't know it. You could say a pit bull, and people didn't even know what pit bull was. And
Way different back then.
oh, I'm talking about mid 70s, 74, 75. There's a lot of people that didn't even know that there was such thing as a pit bull. What is that? They
Right.
would say, you'd say, what kind of dog is that? I've never seen one like that. It said, that's a pit bull. And they go, what is that? What is that? I never heard of that. And, people would say that. Yeah, some people knew what it was, but, and of course there was the deeper, the people that were deep into the dogs from way before I got into them, back in the turn of the century,
Hmm.
late 1800s. And they started importing dogs over here from Ireland.
Right. My
Um,
question is this: while I'm thinking about it, and while we're on it, just when it comes to the line of the Sorrells dogs, like when you say you first got into it, what are some things people don't know about the Sorrells dogs? So if someone here is hearing about that line of dogs right now for the first time, or you know, they're not, haven't had a hand in having a Sorrells dog. What is one of
yeah.
the biggest kept secrets about the Sorrells line from all your experience dealing with them?
Well, the thing that I noticed about Bert right from the get go was that and I had, of course, at that point, I hadn't met all the top dog men. I would later, as years went by, I would meet all the dog men, all the top dog men. But at that time, I met Bert. I was impressed with Bert and his knowledge. I mean, his knowledge was amazing, even though I didn't really have a guide to understand what deeper knowledge meant, but I could walk around his yard and then talk to him, sit down in his living room and talk to him and realize, and it all came to fruit. All that came, uh, my intuition about Bert was right. It was true. And what
Hmm.
I felt about Bert and what he was doing, as far as just the dog part, he was probably one of the smartest dog men I ever met. In fact, probably the smartest, apart from Maurice Carver. I think Maurice Carver probably had an intuition that might have been above Bert. But Bert he had a sixth sense like Maurice did, that he could walk around the yard and know which one was the one that you want to breed to and know
Hmm.
which one was the one you want to go catch a hog with,
Hmm.
and know which girl dog was the best for breeding. And, he just had a natural sense. And I learned a lot of that from him later, but I kind of had an intuitive sense about it right away. And the thing that Bert did that a lot of these dogmen didn't do, and of course, I was drawn to a lot of the different breeds. But every time I'd go to my friends' places, we'd go to a show,
Hmm.
and we'd have friends at the show. Before the show, we'd go to their home, and we'd walk around their yard, and their dogs they were good dogs, but they weren't the type of dogs that were good at anything other than just the box. They
Right.
they were good box dogs, but they weren't the type of dogs you want to make a pet out of. You couldn't bring
Right.
them inside. They weren't the type of dogs that you'd want to have on your couch when you're watching TV at night, when the day was done.
Right.
They were just the dogs that were good at the box only. Whereas
Hmm.
the dogs that I found that Bert was breeding in those days, they were the dog that you could go to the box with them, and 3 days later get them off the chain and bring them inside and put them on the couch, and they'd lick your little daughter's face, or
Right.
your daughter's. I had two daughters, and
Right.
I had a champion, Joe Testament. I had made a champion out of it. And he would go in there. He would leave my bed and go into their bedroom and get up on their bed. And I would wake up in the morning and realize my Joe Testament dog, 3-time champion, was sleeping with my two daughters. I mean, he just
Okay.
loved kids. He loved children. And so the dogs that Bert was breeding and the dogs that, I wound up with as things, we made our split years later,
Hmm.
they were all round dogs. They weren't just box dogs. They were pet. They were catch dogs.
Right.
They were sporting type dogs. You could go to the box with them. You could do all these different events they're doing nowadays. They were good at, like, man, there was one time I went duck hunting. I had my pit bull with me, and he'd
Yeah.
retrieve all the ducks off the boat. I'd shoot a duck out of the air. He'd jump off the boat and swim over there, get the duck, and bring it back. Pit bull.
Right. So
And,
that's great. All around type of
they,
pet, animal,
they,
working dog.
yes, in every attribute. But those dogs of my friends that were also in the dog business,
Yeah.
they were feeding good dogs, but they were singular in their ability. They could only do the box. They weren't worth a
Right.
shit. If you brought them inside, you couldn't even keep them inside more. You could bring them inside, but they wouldn't settle down. They weren't the type of dog you could, like, love on, and have a
Right.
kind of a pet that, you want to hug every now and then, or give him a pet, or,
Right.
sit down, you're eating a snack and you give him half your snack and he takes it out of your hand in a gentle way. And now
Right.
these dogs, the ones I'm talking about, the other dogs, they were great dogs and they were great box dogs, but they weren't all around everything else good dogs. They were just good at that one thing, and that was the box. And make no mistake, they were badass dogs, but they
Right.
weren't good at anything else. They were kind of like just singular in their focus. Whereas the dogs I acquired from Bert and the dogs that I bred from dogs I got from Bert uh, were multi-purpose. Could do anything with them. You could retrieve ducks. You could climb walls, like they got the wall climbers now.
Wall
Outperform
climb,
any and every other dog in any athletic endeavor. You could do weight pulling, uh, all the things,
treadmill race, weight pulling.
treadmill
I guess
races,
right.
everything they do, everything they're doing today. Sorrells dogs excel at those things. In fact, the
Okay.
truth is, Bert Sorrells and Ralph Greenwood are the ones that started the ADBA confirmation shows. And out of the ADBA confirmation shows, all those other events came out. The wall climbers, the weight
Right.
pullers, the treadmill racers,
It just
and
grew from there. It grew from that start.
yep, it grew from that start. And Bert was one of the guys that helped stand the whole ADBA up. The ADBA was started by Ralph and Bert. See, Ralph was the one that bought the ADBA. It was already ADBA, but it
Right.
was in a shambles. It was faltering. They were in what they call Chapter 11. They were in bankruptcy, and nobody was using them as a source to record the dogs or have a pedigree as a registration standard. And then Ralph bought it. But before Ralph bought it, he called Bert because in those days, this is late 60s, early, mid 60s.
Hmm.
Bert had all of the database And in those days, there was no computers. It was all filing cabinets. He
Right.
had 4 big old filing cabinets in the back room in his house. 4 of them. They were big ones. And they were full from top to bottom. The old, you used to see in the office space, big filing
Mhm.
cabinets where you push a button and open the drawer and it's got all these folders in there. And the
Mhm.
drawers are super long. And
Right.
every drawer was full of these folders. And it was all the database for all the dogs. Bert had the database for all the pit bulls in the country.
He kept
And
records. He had the records on him.
he had all the records, and Ralph called Bert and asked him if he would send him that stuff, copy it off and send it. And it got so heavy for Bert. Bert lived in Arizona those days. Ralph lived, no, Bert lived in California in those days, and Ralph lived in Utah. And I think Ralph came to Bert's place, and they started copying all the records, and that's where the ADBA got stood up.
Mhm.
But Bert
Okay.
Bert was ahead of his time with regard to understanding pedigrees, making breeding a dog that was multi-purposed. They were match dogs. You could win with them in the box. They were also hunting dogs or catch dogs. You could catch hogs with them. You could do small game. You could turn them into squirrel dogs, which I really excelled at squirrel hunting stuff.
Mhm.
And all the in the hogs, I've done everything. I've caught every wild game there is. I've bear hunted with mine. Years ago, we bear hunted down here in Florida. We've got bears where I live, and down just south of where I live, there's bears everywhere. And we would hunt bears. We hunted bears with pit bulls,
So
and
the all around dog is like, I
in
think that's
every way,
a
yes,
great thing. Yeah.
they were the best all around dogs. And I kind of knew that intuitively when I first met Bert, and it all came to fruit. And I realized years later that my intuition was right. And
Mhm.
that, my only intuition about Bert that was wrong was that I trusted him. I should never
Mhm.
have trusted him. He, Bert, if you read his pedigree, if you go back to any of the old pedigrees on Bert, he had dogs from Maurice Carver. He had dogs from, Ed Crenshaw, and he
Right.
had dogs, miscellaneous different dog men around the country. Mostly Maurice Carver and Ed Crenshaw. Ed Crenshaw and Maurice were the 2 big entities whereby Bert got a lot of his foundation from.
Right.
He traded with Indy and Sonny too, but the problem with Bert was if it was a famous dog like Boomerang, and he got
Yeah.
some Boomerang blood from Baker Davis,
Right.
he couldn't put Boomerang. If he had Boomerang, he couldn't have Boomerang because he couldn't put his name in front of it because everybody know it was Davis's Boomerang, not Sorrells' Boomerang. So,
And he
but
wanted the credit for it.
he wanted to have his name in every dog, and that's how he wound up with Champion Uncle Bud, Champion Joe Testament, Champion Johnny Walker Red. Which, see, all those were my dogs. Those were dogs I championed out.
And a lot of
Those were
folks
dogs
don't know that they actually were your dogs that you had
I
handled.
championed out all of that blood, all that champion raisin. I
Mhm.
championed raisin out. I championed the sailor dog out. I championed not hard eyes. Now that was Bert's all the way 100%. I wouldn't take
What
credit
year?
for
What
hard
year was
eyes.
this? So we can put a
Okay, starting in around 1981.
okay. And
Uh,
you don't have to be specific. Just I guess a
yeah,
roundabout so
right
people
at
know it's all historical.
1981. 81 was when I got out of the Navy SEALs. I was in
Okay.
the SEALs from 1970 until 1981. And when I got out of the SEALs in 1981, that's when I really started ramping up with Bert and getting connected to Bert. Of course, I was from Florida, but I was living in California as a SEAL. There was a camp, a SEAL camp on the West Coast, and that's where I
Mhm.
was. And that wasn't very far from where Bert lived. It was probably a 6 or 7 hour drive. So
Right.
when I left California, and exited from the Navy, I drove to Bert's. I stayed at Bert's for probably 4 or 5 months. Right there, I just lived there with Bert.
To to keep you on that point, because this is what I'm very interested in: the Uncle Bud, the Joe Testament, the Raisin Dog, just
Yeah.
those dogs that you championed out and had, back in the day and that time. What were some things that stood out about those dogs that you liked? I guess what would be your favorite one out of all of them? It may be hard to answer that,
Yeah.
like all of them, but which would be like, hey, that was the one. If I could have him over again, I'll take him over again. Or those two there, I'll take those two over again today.
Well, I think the most, man, they were all, everyone. Oh my God. The stuff I went through with all four of those, I count champion Johnny Walker Red. Now, he
Hmm.
never got credit for only two matches. He was a
Right.
4-time, Johnny Walker Red was a 4-time winner. So he had actually won more than Raisin or Joe Testament or Uncle Bud. Uncle Bud and Joe Testament and Raisin, they all won 3 each, but Johnny Walker won 4. But out of those 4 dogs there, and I champion out other dogs besides, those are just the top 4 that I always mention. Um, God, I
Right.
couldn't pick one out of, there's no way out of those 4 that I could pick a best. I couldn't, because they all had qualities that
Yeah.
were specific to that individual dog. But man, I had raised, and I went into a guy named Nate Newton. Nate Newton was a offensive guard for the Dallas Cowboys back in the mid '80s. Okay, I want to say this was around '87, '88 when we
Hmm.
matched into Nate Newton. And I got to say about Nate, man, hey, bro, nobody came more ready than Nate. He came right. He brought the right bloodline. He brought the right dog, and he
Hmm.
brought them in shape, buddy. He brought them in condition. He brought them ready for combat. He brought them ready for a war, and he was very good at what he did. And because he was the NFL champion, he
Right.
was a starting.
Well over
Uh,
40 years
he was
ago, man.
starting. Huh?
I said it's about well over 40 years ago. You
It was
say eight,
around
late
80,
80s.
I want to say 87 or 88 was the year we matched into Nate Newton. I
Okay,
know
so
the
you say he
date.
came
I
ready.
got the date. Oh yeah, man. Nate was a real, what I would call an asset to the dog business. He was a professional. He wasn't a loudmouth. He didn't run his mouth. He had somebody else handling for him. He was so big. I think he probably didn't want, I don't know why he didn't handle. Because, I mean, being an offensive guard, I'm sure he was probably quicker and faster than about anybody he could have found. But he was sitting in the stands. I was handling Raisin
Right.
against Nate's dog. Uh, he had some other guy handled, but pound for pound, that guy was good too. He was pretty good, but I outhandled him. I outdid him. I
Yeah.
did. I'm not bragging. It's not a brag. I'm just making a statement of facts. The truth is,
Right.
I outhandled him, and that was one of the reasons we won that match because it was a tit for tat. If I was going to give it to either dog in the first 15 minutes, I would have given it to Nate's dog over Raisin. In fact, I would
Okay.
say that in that match, we were behind by a nose the whole time. We were never ahead in that match. Never. Not one
Oh.
minute. And it was 97 minutes. We were never ahead until the last scratch. And we scratched 17 times each.
Wow. Damn.
17 times each. And on the 18th time, the 18th scratch, Nate Newton's dog stood the corner. And my eyes bugged out of my head. I could not believe it because that dog
Yeah.
was beaten. He was winning. He was ahead of us. Because Raisin, every time that dog would do something, Raisin
Hmm.
would count every single time. That
You say
dog
he
would
would
give
counter
him
it.
a Raisin countered every move that dog made. But it was a counter move. It wasn't an off. It was a move that he had to do after it was done to him. So he
Right.
responded to what was happening to him, and he just frustrated that dog to no end. And that, man, hey, it was one of the matches that they were going as hard at 90 minutes as they were at the first 10. That was the only match I ever saw that they were going full speed the whole time, and they never
Right.
slowed down. They never
That
slowed
sound
down.
like
There was no let
sound like
up in the pace. The pace
hell
was
of a conditioned dog.
unbelievable. I couldn't believe the pace on that match. The pace was probably the fastest pace I ever saw for that long of a period of time. Because, every time you put dogs down, the first 15 or 20 minutes, the pace is unbelievable. But by
Right.
30 minutes, the pace slows down. And at the hour mark, it started to settle in. And they hold that pace, they'll hold that pace up to 2 hours. But these two, Nate Newton had a dog from Zebo's brother. His name was Vindicator. And this dog
Okay.
we were into was sired by Vindicator.
Okay.
And he would, man, I got to say, even though he stopped 97 minutes in, I would have fed that dog to the day he died. He was a great dog. And even though
Yeah.
he quit, he was a cur, and all the people called him a cur and whatever. I turned around and told everybody, I said, don't you call that motherfucker a cur. I said, that dog gave it all he had, and he had to stop because he was going to die, and he knew it. And while he technically would be called a cur, he was one of the greatest curs I ever saw in my life. He
Right.
was amazing. That dog was amazing. And I would have fed him till the cows came home. But, yeah, we pulled that one off. But, and then, now Uncle Bud, all three of his, he never met his match. I mean, there wasn't nothing could stay with him. Everything they put on it. I mentioned Ronnie, I didn't know this until years later. I mentioned a Pat Patrick dog on the first time out with Uncle Bud. And he was only 15, 16 months old when I did him his first time.
Okay.
And we were into a Pat Patrick dog. That was back when Patrick was breeding Tombstone and Red Baby. I'm pretty sure that's what that was. So we beat that dog. We beat the dog with Tombstone and Red Baby from the Patrick yard. And we were all excited about it. Then the next year we came out with him again. And we were into Ronnie Hyde, didn't know it. And, of course, Ronnie Hyde was grandson or godson of Maurice Carver. So Maurice Carver was Ronnie Hyde's godfather.
Okay.
And so Ronnie Hyde actually grew up living with Maurice Carver. So he learned everything Maurice knew.
Right.
Maurice knew everything. But I'll tell you one thing about Maurice, he did not know how to shape a dog.
Okay,
Maurice
so that was it.
Yep, that was Maurice's Achilles heel, as so to speak. Maurice's weak link was he did not understand conditioning. See, now that was the thing about Bert. He understood everything about breeding, but he was a master at conditioning. Bert absolutely had it. He nailed it. He knew conditioning inside and out, and that's how I got my leg up, by knowing how to shape a dog.
And it sounds like that's what got you over in that what we just spoke about raising when he
Yep. Well, we outshaped him. Yep.
You outshaped
Well, the difference between Raisin and the dog we were into with Nate Newton, Raisin was a game dog. He would have never quit. He would have died fighting. But Nate Newton's dog would not have. I mean, obviously he didn't.
Right.
But the conditioning, had we not been in shape, they probably would have whipped us. Probably would have killed us. But because we were in good shape and we were game too, we pulled it out. Even though they were ahead, like I say, ahead by a nose the whole time. And nobody could say that Raisin was ahead. Nobody. Everybody said, man, it's pretty even. It's pretty even. I mean, I'd take a breather about once every 10 minutes, and I'd stand up and go back to the corner, turn around and look at Bert. Bert was sitting in my corner. You know, Bert was right behind me. And I'd say, what do you think? He goes, oh, man, it's a nip and tuck. He goes, just stay with it. You're doing good. stay with him, and I'd go right back to it. And it was it was a war.
Is that what you say about intelligence? Like with that Sorrells?
Yes, very, very intelligent.
He was countering, so he had to be a smart dog to understand how to survive that.
Well, see, that was the Joe Testament dog. Joe Testament was a pit general. He was a general in that he understood the battlefield. And the thing that was cool about Joe Testament, one, he could bite real hard.
Okay.
But
some folks think the Sorrells dogs won't have mouth, but Joe Testament, he could bite.
Yeah. Hey, buddy, the two hardest biting dogs I ever saw in my life were, one of them was bred by me. That was Uncle Bud's brother, and I'll tell you about him in a little while. And then another dog was called Old Boiler. That was Bert's bitch, and she was the hardest biting female I ever saw in my life. And that's two dogs that I know of, hardest biting dogs I ever saw, without any prejudice, the hardest biting dogs I ever saw, and they were pure Sorrells dogs. But going back to Joe Testament, talking about him, you know how a smart boxer comes out, and the first 3 rounds, a smart boxer probably just throws a few jabs, but he's watching and learning from the opponent. He's not throwing anything out there that's going to give away his skill or his talent. He's not going to open himself up. He's going to play it safe and smart. He's going to dance around. He's going to do his foot, use the footwork to keep him out of trouble. And he would only mostly jabs, very rarely throw his right hand or his strong hand. He would mostly, jab and jab and jab. And then after the 3rd round, a good boxer's coming out on the 4th or 5th round, and then they're going to start opening up a little bit and taking risks and doing things that are, And that was Joe Testament. He would come out and get on your neck up high, right behind, not on your ear now. He wasn't an ear sucker. That's what they say today, an ear sucker. He wasn't an ear dog. He was a neck dog. He would get high on your neck, behind your ear. Right there where the skull of a pit bull and his neck, and there's a deep crevice there. He would, and it was behind the ear, right high on the neck, and he would throw his front legs back, and he would run defense for the first 20 minutes. And he did this all 3 times I matched him. He'd run defense for the first 20 minutes. And then after 20 minutes, when you could tell that the pace was slowing, first thing he'd do is go right to your stifle, and he'd wear you out back there. And he would wreck you real quick. And if you couldn't get to the stifle, he'd get to the front shoulder. But if you started getting in trouble by opening yourself up, going to the shoulder, anytime a dog makes an offensive move, he's opening himself up to a move on himself, by the opponent. So, but Joe Testament understood that this might be a long night. Like a good boxer knows that this might go 15 rounds, Right. A good boxer knows it could go 15 rounds, so he's not coming out in the first 3 rounds killing it. He's going to pace himself. And that's Joe Testament. That was the way. He had strategy built into his psyche, into his strategy, into his overall.
His makeup,
his whole concept of combat dogs. And so each one of the dogs, I made champion out of another dog named Jack, and I made champion. That was a brother to Boiler, but he couldn't bust a grape. And his sister, Boiler, Old Boiler, oh my God, Bert matched Old Boiler into a guy named Big Pete that was from over there, and I think Pete was from, I want to say he was from Louisiana or maybe Mississippi, and he was a big old tall guy, and he was deep in the game. He's a very active, dog man, very active.
Yeah.
When I say active, matching a lot of dogs, very active. Yeah. And So he was very active, and he matched into Bert and me and Bert. I conditioned Boiler, but Bert handled. That was the last time Bert ever handled a dog, and there was no handling to it. Boiler bit so hard, huh?
I'm just curious. How old? Yeah, when he handled. He said last time he handled. How old was he?
Oh, probably in his late 50s at that point.
Okay, all right, not too bad.
Maybe mid 50s. Yeah, but we came out and they let him go, and Boiler caught Big Pete. You leave it. Hold on a second. Okay. So they let him go, and old Boiler from Bert. Boiler was sired by Hard Eyes and out of Bandit, by the way. Sired by Hard Eyes out of Bandit. And
right.
She caught Big Pete's bitch right between the eyes. A skull bite. Right on top of the skull. Right on top of the head. And, normally when you get a dog that catches that spot, there's so much skull there, and there's no flesh. There's just skin over the top of the skull,
Right.
And so normally most dogs that grab that hold lose that hold because there's nothing to get into. There's nothing to bite into.
Right.
And the bone, you know what I mean? But it was weird. I mean, at first, I thought, wow, okay. And 2 minutes go by, and she's still on it, on that spot, and pushing that Big Pete's bitch down into the carpet. And it appeared that Boiler was cinching down like a vice. Like she got her hold, but then she cinched down a little tighter. And every couple of minutes that would go by, she would crunch down tighter. And then after six... Huh?
This is the bitch that could bite, just so I can follow the story and everybody can... So her brother couldn't bite, but she could bite.
Her brother couldn't bite and busted grape. I made a 3-time winner out of him. His name was Jack. And he was a game dog, but he couldn't... but this is his sister, Boiler.
Okay.
And the other brother was Sailor. Sailor was the brother of Boiler. Okay?
Right.
And Sailor, now he was a biter. He was a rough dog, but going back to Boiler, at about 5 minutes, you could literally see where she had a big wide bite from the beginning. Her mouth was closing, like you were squeezing a vice. And every minute that would go by, she would cinch down a little tighter. And by 6 or 7 minutes, everybody was going, oh, my God, man. People were cringing because you could hear you could hear the skull on the female from Big Pete breaking. She was breaking his skull. She was literally crushing that dog's skull.
Wow.
And at 6 minutes, Big Pete goes, I call a turn on my bitch. And Bert laughed and said, okay, yeah, you want a turn? You can have a turn. I'll agree to your turn. There wasn't no turn. Big Pete was trying to get a turn so he could somehow, get an advantage and get out of that situation and get in the scratch pit, starting to scratch. But you can't make a handle when dogs are in hold.
Right.
And so Boiler was in hold, and he was trying to call a turn as if he would somehow make a handle. And Bert goes, yeah, you want to make a handle, make your handle. But, in those days, unlike today, they don't observe rules like they used to. In those days, they observe rules. Nowadays, nobody observes any rules.
Right.
That's why, I don't have anything to do with the nasty game that it is today. I got no problem saying it. The people that are involved today, they have no concept of rules. They don't care about rules. Although they sit here and watch an NBA basketball game and see the whistle blow in a playoff game, the whistle blow 60 times in one quarter. And every one of them will agree, every person watching that NBA game will agree there was a foul on that guy, a foul on that guy, a foul on that guy. And they would watch those games and agree with every foul. But you put them in the box, and there's fouls all up and down. They don't see any foul. They don't see a foul. unless it's against them. If it's against them, they might call a foul. The thing is, these young guys today doing that stuff, they have no idea. They don't know what a foul is. They don't even know what the rules are. But anyway, Boiler, getting back to Boiler, he tried to call a turn. Bert laughed and said, "Yeah, I agree. You can call a turn." The referee goes, "Yeah, if you want to call a turn, we'll agree there's a turn." There wasn't. But at 9 minutes, Big Pete's bitch was dead. Graveyard.
Man.
Dead.
So it didn't even matter.
Not a freaking nothing left. Never got a hold, never got a bite, never got nothing. 9 minutes dead. It was over. And then now I'll tell you about the other hardest biting dog I ever saw. That was probably the hardest. But I had one. His name was Crazy Horse, and he was a littermate brother. Crazy Horse. He was a littermate brother to champion Uncle Bud.
Mm-hmm.
And we rolled him. After we had won with Uncle Bud, we knew Crazy Horse was probably going to be just as good as Bud was. They were twins. They were identical twins. Well, my pick between the two, my brother and I, we loved both of them, but we had already made, we had won 2 times with Uncle Bud before we even went out the first time with Crazy Horse.
Mm-hmm.
But we put Crazy Horse down. He bit so hard that we couldn't roll him. But we thought that, well, it might be a fluke. We didn't put much emphasis on it, but we got him hooked over in a place called Natchez, Mississippi. The place, the guy's name was Don Parton. Now, he's long gone. He died. But he had a beautiful place, big old mushroom oaks, a nice home up on a hill, and then it went down in the back, had a nice box down there and a barn, and it's just a beautiful place. We had gone there several times to do dogs, but in this occasion, we took Crazy Horse, Uncle Bud's brother. And Crazy Horse, the thing about him was we never got to roll him because he bit that one time so hard, and we had already made 2-time winner out of Uncle Bud. We thought, well, let's just take a chance on him. We didn't even know anything about him. Let's take a chance and let's go with him. So we were ready to go and take a chance. And we were confident that we could bring it in good shape, and he was going to be, well, we figured out, well, he must be about as good as Uncle Bud was, so we went. And we put him down, and that dog grabbed us by the ear. And that dog shook us from one end of that box to the other for 25, almost 30 straight minutes. And Crazy Horse never even took a hold. And now he had a spot. He could have taken a hold several times. Yeah. Crazy Horse, most laid-back pit bull I ever saw. I mean, we were seeing him match for the first time, but it was really we're seeing him go for the first time, except for that one little short bump we did, to find out he was biting the dog so hard we had to pick him up, and we did, so we really never got to see him do anything, except that one little 3-minute deal in the, at the house.
Right.
And we thought that might have been a fluke, so we didn't count on him being that hard of a biter. But nevertheless, we went, and for 25, almost 30 minutes, Crazy Horse never took a hold. And then right around the 30-minute mark, and that dog was, like I say, thrashing us around, on top the whole way, just beating us up generally. He wasn't hurting us like, fatally. He wasn't doing anything fatally to us. He was just beating us up. It was like a bully beating up a small guy in the, on the baseball field behind the, behind the schoolyard.
Dugout. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, damn, man. I was just sitting there. My brother was handling Crazy Horse, actually. I wasn't handling, my brother was. And all of a sudden, right at 30-minute mark, it was like Crazy Horse decided, man, I'm done playing here. I don't want to do this no more. I'm done. And he came around as if it was no effort at all. He got squared up in front of that dog, and he put his mouth right on that the sternum, like where your sternum is, right on the very apex of your brisket, and right behind the sternum is your heart. The heart of the dog is same with a person, same with all animals. Your heart is right behind your rib cage. Crazy Horse bit that dog one time. At the 30-minute mark, he bit him. At 30 minutes and 30 seconds, that dog was dead.
Come on.
And he bled out right there in one bite. He actually, God is my witness, it's the truth. This is like 1983 or 84.
Right. No, I believe you. I believe you.
When he bit that dog, it was like the literal life of that dog, which bled right out of him. And it was almost like if you took a can of like a can of motor oil, and it was red. Say motor oil was red. You took and opened a can of motor oil and poured it right out on the pit floor. That was what it was like. And it was thick, and it was deep, dark red, and it just came out like a puddle. Man. It wasn't no arch. It wasn't no venous like venal. When you cut your finger, you got blood coming out. But then when you cut a real vein or an artery, man, you really talking about a volume of blood coming out. And he bit that dog one time. At 30 minutes and 30 seconds, that dog was dead. And I'm not, as God is my witness. And those between Boulder and Crazy Horse are the two hardest biting dogs I ever saw. And I've seen, I've witnessed 3,000 matches in my life. And that's a conservative guess. I know at least that many.
Right.
And you learn a lot. You learn a lot from watching that many matches, I learned, I tell you what I learned most about when I was watching all those matches is I learned how to handle. Because I learned what not to do, and I learned what to do. And, of course, you also learn in your own backyard by rolling your own dogs with each other and finding out, how to handle, when to get in there and move your dog out of the way, or, when the dogs are out of hold, when to handle. But, let me say this, too, about all that. Mm-hmm. Those are the days in the 70s and the 80s. They're long behind me. I'm not involved in anything like that anymore. I don't condone it. I don't even agree with it anymore. My heart has changed towards my dogs. The idea that they might get hurt anymore is just, at 73 years old, I just have no desire to allow my dogs to get hurt. I couldn't do it. And on top of that, the crowd, the type of people that are involved in the same game I was involved in, they're not the same crowd. It's a different crowd. They're a different type of people. There's no gentleman there. There's nobody that's humble. They're all arrogant and conceited and loudmouth and braggers and bullies and gun toters. And if they lose, they'll shoot you. And if they win, they'll lord it over you and scream and tell you how terrible you are and how awesome they are. So I got no use for that dog. That part of the dog game. The part of the dog game I'm into, or the old running through the woods with my dog and catching armadillos, catching squirrels, and occasionally going hog hunting and doing wholesome, clean things with my dogs. Not anything like that. So I'm done with all that. But I'm just telling you, it's all historical. Everything I'm talking about from the 70s, 80s, and the 90s, that was all. It's all historical. It's all behind me. I'm not involved. I love every dog I got. I don't have a mark on any dogs. Everything I got's clean.
With that being said, I like how you transition into that especially with the dogs of today, like the Sorrells blood being an all-around dog, all-around pet, family companion
Yeah.
is what drew me to the line. With
Yeah.
somebody wanting a dog today, I mean, they got a lot of different bloodlines, and then we still have to educate people on, hey, every dog they call a pit bull is not a real, true pit bull, and I think for some reason we still have to fight for that for our own sake. Hey, this is a real, true pit bull versus the all the other breeds, the bully breeds. They mix it in so much now, but if somebody wants a real pit bull today, the Sorrells line will be a good family dog for them, a good all-around pet companion that
Yeah.
can still fulfill that role today in
If
today's
you
modern
can,
time.
yeah, that's absolutely true. But here's the problem: there's only a few of us left out there that are actually breeding some of the old Sorrells line. And keep in mind, even now, because Bert got out of the dog game 15 years before he died.
Mm-hmm.
He lived 15 years past the last day of his last dog. Whereas, so 15 years on top of the fact, I think Bert's been dead probably 7 or 8 years. And then on top of 15, that's 20, 22, 23 years ago when Bert was still had his dogs. And then on top of that, you can't breed any one line to itself over a long period of time without getting too tight.
Right,
you
right.
get too into it, you got to make a cross. You got to find a cross. And there was an old story that came to me. There was a guy named Phil Dibble. He was from New Mexico. And Phil Dibble was, in my opinion, a great dog man. And one of his best friends was a guy named Randy Chavez. Now, Randy died, but Randy and Phil were best buddies. Randy died, but now Ron, his brother, is still alive. He's out in New Mexico. But nevertheless, Randy and Phil were running together. And I talked to Phil on the phone one day years ago. And he said, back in the day when I was first getting connected to Bert, and I had already gotten the Johnny Walker Red, liberated him out of the South County Animal Shelter and all that stuff. That whole story I won't go into again.
I remember the story. I heard it. I think a lot of us heard it.
Well, nevertheless, so Phil Dibble told me, he says, yeah. He goes, back in those days, in the 70s and 80s, when I was getting in it, they were ahead of me. They got in it before me. Not a long time before me, but a few years, Mm-hmm. And they said, while we were all busy trying to get dogs from Bert, trying to somehow figure out a way to get this, that, or the other dog from Bert was busy trying to get dogs from Maurice Carver. And I always remembered that, thinking, yeah, man, when I get to making my crosses, that's what I want to do. I want to get the old Carver blood. I want to find the old Carver stuff. And I'm not talking about that new age Carver shit that you see, the Thibodeau stuff. You see Thibodeau's Carver, Thibodeau blood from Tar Baby and all that stuff, the Tar Baby line.
Yes, sir.
No fucking way. No. I don't care two shits about that blood. I want the old stuff that Ronnie Hyde was running, and I got it. And it took me a while to find it, and it took me a while to acquire it after I found it.
Yeah.
But Ronnie Hyde died about 4 years ago. And, of course, Ronnie, in his own right, he understood dogs. He was a good dog man all around. I got to say, he wasn't the winningest dog man, but he was a steady dog man. And problem with Ronnie, he was crooked, and he did time in prison, and they were involved in other stuff besides just dogs. Kind of living their life on a fringe of living kind of a outlaw type life. You know what I mean? Right. So I think they were involved in probably dabbling in drugs and stuff like that, which a lot of these dog men did that to be able to support their dogs, so that they could just keep matching. Because back in the day when we matched a lot of dogs, you match a dog, all you want to do is match another. And so it fed on itself, and you win one, you want to go back and win another. And we have this old saying: yeah, you won last night, Saturday night, you won last night, but Sunday you ain't nothing but a junkyard dog. In other words, you proved it Saturday, but on Sunday you got to prove it again. You're a junkyard dog. But anyway, going back to the mix, Bert was always trying to get Maurice Carver's dogs, while we were all trying to get Sorrells dogs. Sorrells was trying to get Maurice dogs. But he wasn't going for just any Maurice dogs. He was going for specific dogs from Maurice, and that was anything heavy, Black Widow, really the type-bred Black Widow and the Carver's Miss Spike blood. That was what Bert was after. And I didn't understand it then, but of course nowadays because I understand pedigree so much better. Miss Spike is behind, or I should say, is in front of Klaus's Zeke, because Miss Spike's mother is Womack's Mert, and Womack's Mert is a littermate sister to Klaus's Zeke. And now back in the mid-'70s, Zeke was, people don't realize it, Zeke was the baddest dog of his day. He was a bad-ass dog. He was a wrecker. He would wreck you in moments. And nothing he did lasted more than about 15 or 20 minutes. He wrecked everything.
Yeah.
And he was a great dog, and not only that, he was a great producer, but Bert wound up with Sorrells Bull. And of course, Sorrells Bull was sired by Zeke out of a daughter of Zeke.
Right.
So Sorrells Bull was the inbred son of Zeke. He was tighter bred Zeke than Eve. And of course, nowadays, the most popular, and these young guys, they don't know the difference. The most popular Zeke dog out there is Indian Bolio.
Bolio, right.
Bolio was, by his own right, he was a good dog, but he wasn't bred as good as Zeke, Bull was. Bull was bred better than Bolio. But what they did is they took a sister of Bolio, her name was Daisy, and they bred her back to her daddy, Zeke. And that's where you got Sorrells Bull. And Sorrells Bull was a great producer. So Bert was always going back to Maurice and Bert was a wheeler dealer, man. He was a horse trader from way back. He would deal and talk to you on the phone for hours. He'd figure out a way to get what you had in his yard. And he would pay money. He would buy dogs. As long as you had something really top notch, he would give you money for it. But you had to hold him to it, though. He would try. He was like Maurice. They had that little bit of edge of con artist, in them. Yeah. And they would, like used car salesmen, tell you what you wanted to hear. So they were salesmen and peddlers, and but of the two, Bert was a better dog overall because Bert understood matching dogs more than Maurice did. Now, don't get me wrong. In the early going, Maurice matched a lot of dogs. I mean, he did. He matched dogs all over Mexico, South Texas, East and West Texas. And but then as Maurice got older, he started slowing down, and he got to where he wouldn't. He was just a breeder. He was a breed dog. When I met Maurice, he had already laid back, and he had quit matching dogs, and he was just breeding good dogs. He was breeding good dogs. But between the two, I think Bert was a better dog man because Bert understood breeding like Maurice did. I think he learned a lot from Maurice as far as breeding goes.
And that's why you say he was going back to get Maurice's dogs while everybody was getting his
trying
dogs.
To get his dogs. Yeah.